And so something very interesting happens in 2006, the same year that the PlayStation 3 comes out. Nintendo launches the Wii. And it comes out with literally half the visual fidelity capability of the PlayStation or the Xbox 360. It has 128 megabytes of texture memory. And it goes on to become the leading console because it introduces a new interface. And I think you guys remember when this thing came out, the Wiimote, I mean, it's just like, it totally opened up gaming for, you know, the larger population. And suddenly it was this whole way to interact with, you know, basically your game console. I mean, you guys remember, you probably have had this experience in the past where how many people here play console games, out of curiosity? Okay, cool. So you guys have like had a significant other next to you and you're playing whatever, and they're like, that's really fun. Let me try. And you like hand them the controller and it's just a disaster, right? Like, they're like running the character into the wall, and it's just, you know, it's really painful, and you're like, you know, just give it back. But the Wii was like, you know, now everybody can play games, right? Now your grandmother can play tennis with you, hooray, right? And so, you know, I think it's really funny to think that, you know, because of that interface, the Wii becomes like this huge success. It outgrosses the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360 combined. It's sold out every month for the first 3 years after its release. It like totally changed the home video game industry. And there's this really great quote from Gunpei Yokoi, who's the inventor of the D-pad and the Game Boy and a bunch of other stuff at Nintendo. He says, in video games, there's an easy way out if you don't have any good ideas. CPU competition. And I think very much so, if you look at the major innovations in interface in games, they've mostly come from Nintendo over the past, you know, couple decades. So, you know, now we've seen all sorts of interfaces coming out. So the PlayStation Move comes out in 2010, as well as the Kinect, you know, and all of this sort of interface focus shifts from making the games look really good to trying to create better interfaces. And these devices haven't, frankly, done that well. I mean, the Kinect is interesting because it's become more of a research tool. But in terms of like actual mainstream entertainment, anyone here actually use the Sony Move on a regular basis? How many people have actually used it at all? Yeah, like 3 of you guys. How many people here have used a Wii? Yeah, right. Good point. So, you know, I think that the challenge here is if you haven't established a culture of a certain interface mentality, it's very hard to change that as well. And you guys have all probably seen, you know, Microsoft try to change their perspective on their, you know, their game console. Much friendlier now. You can make little avatars and stuff like that. But we're seeing all sorts of interesting interfaces come out now. Google Glass is due out sometime this year as a prototype, supposedly. Leap 3D. How many people here know about this? Oh, I have to show you a video. Okay, I'll show you a video of Leap 3D. It's this little dongle that sits on your desk, and it projects like a, I don't know, a couple cubic feet of sensor detection area in front of your computer screen. And it's like Kinect on steroids. It can detect down to like, you know, like 1/10 of a millimeter and like thousands of points of interaction. So you can like minority report in front of your computer screen. And this is supposed to come out like as a prototype to developers this year, and it's supposed to retail for like $70. It's totally crazy. And this was kind of a fun one. At Disney, they have this huge R&D department, which is what's kind of so cool about it, because you never really know based on the outward-facing sort of appearance of the company. But they've made this sort of experimental technology called Touche. I guess it's just a play on the word touch. It turns any surface into a touch screen. So you can actually like control your iPad or your phone from your hand, or a doorknob or a couch. And it's just a single wire that you can like wire. It's really cool. So we're seeing all sorts of new technology innovating in this way. So my argument here is that the emphasis is switched now from visual fidelity to interface as a driver of our technology, as a driver of our storytelling. And that's really where the focus is now as media creators, as designers, and as storytellers. You guys remember mobile phones? How they used to be? Right? I mean, it's just like every kind of interface imaginable. You had, you know, foldable this and Palm Pilot that with a stylus. And, you know, there was not really a right answer to this. And I think everybody was really trying to figure out, you know, in the world of mobile computing, how to make interface work. And I think it's a fascinating place to study because it's something that really requires interface to work well. And then, of course, you know, in 2007, Apple introduces the iPhone, and it totally upends what a mobile phone can be. And now mobile phones look like this, right? There's just that lawsuit between Samsung and Apple. And they're like, well, everyone copied us. It's like, yeah, you know, I mean, you know, Xerox PARC isn't suing Apple, but whatever. So it's just this interesting idea when you come up with an idea that works and how it just disrupts everything and opens up a world that people wanted but they couldn't access before because the interface wasn't good. So let's talk about mobile phones for a second. I see us now in the age of the mobile phone, really, the rise of mobile, because if you think about it, PlayStation 3, 2006, original iPhone, 2007, we've had a new iPhone every year since then. We've had 6 iPhones. We've had 3 PlayStations. We've had 6 iPhones come out since 2006. We still haven't seen a new PlayStation. And so, you know, every year Apple will reintroduce a new model. And unlike the console where you might get, you know, an HD TV or a 5-channel surround sound or Blu-ray, so you might not actually use those things. You might not actually buy the TV or the sound system. The iPhone is an all-in-one system. You know, if there's new sensors that come out. You know, those things have front-facing cameras. If Leap 3D is successful, the front-facing camera is going to have Leap 3D technology in the iPhone 7. Like, it's going to come. And so you get a whole system. And you also have a very different use case when it comes to actually how you consume these things. Because the phone lifespan is actually 18 months. That means if you don't have a smartphone now, 18 months from now you probably will. Whereas with a game console, it's 6 years, and you're not even guaranteed that you'll get one. And so the use cases for these technology pieces are very different. And the emphasis, like I said, is not just on fidelity of the phone, but on multiple aspects of technology. It's got the iPhone 5, and like the LTE on it's ridiculous. I can get like 20 megabit down and 20 megabit upload. It's like faster than my home wired connection, so that's totally crazy. And then, of course, the other difference is that everyone has a mobile phone. They're lifestyle devices. They're in our lives. They're, you know, it's part of how we live our lives. Okay, so mobile devices. What can those do, right? Well, they're pretty versatile. I mean, you know, you can listen to music and watch movies and Angry Birds, and you can read books on it. But what's also fascinating is this isn't just about the media that you consume on a mobile device, but it's the communication you do as well, like making phone calls and checking your email and Facebook and Twitter, taking photos and all that sort of stuff. And so you have a culture that's very different from the game console, which is sort of one-way communication, whereas a phone is something used to communicate with the world, and so it's really a two-way system that way. If you want to think about the ecosystem of television in the past, for example, you had media creators, you had channels of distribution, and then you had an audience, right, that would receive one way that content. And if you bought a new television, that ecosystem would grow by one consumer. But nowadays, if you buy an iPad or a phone, that whole ecosystem is growing not just by one consumer, but by one media creator or by one broadcaster. And so the whole dynamics of that whole world around these devices is totally different. It's participatory in a way it just never has been before. Okay, so when you have all of these things on one device, you can start to actually blend them together. And I think this is where it gets really interesting. Just to give you a couple of examples of that. So there's this really great agency called Tools North America. How many people here have seen the Take This Lollipop interactive film on the internet? 4 of you guys? Okay, so tell everybody in the room, you've got to see this thing. It's really, really cool. It's basically an interactive movie that takes your Facebook details and creates this like little horror thriller movie with your personal information in it. And it's really well done. And this thing went like ridiculously viral. They got 130 million viewers in a month. It's the fastest uptake of anything that ever used Facebook ever. So that's an interesting way to blend filmmaking together with social media, in this case Facebook. And then they also did this reality TV show called Screwed, where they took sort of Joe Average guy and dropped him in the middle of the bayou, and he has to like figure out how to build a raft and get out of there. He knows nothing about how to use tools, and there's all sorts of like materials and resources stashed around his campsite. And the only way he can figure this out is if on Twitter you're watching the show and you're actually typing in like recommendations or hints or comments. And then the show producers would actually curate that, and in real time you could actually talk with this character. And there's a whole new way to have a reality TV show, because it wasn't one-way communication again, it was participatory. So that's an interesting way to combine internet-based television with Twitter. And so in our case, we took a book, and we took movies, and we took interactivity and games, and the game engine, and photos, and we made Operation Ajax. How many people here have actually seen the graphic novel? 4 of you guys? Okay, well I'll show you the trailer, and then I'll dive sort of separately out of this into that, and show you a little bit more about what that actually meant. This is the trailer for that project.
Introducing Operation Ajax for the iPad, based on actual events of the CIA's involvement in overthrowing the Iranian government. A bold and original interactive graphic novel that redefines digital comics and the art of storytelling in 210 handcrafted pages. Navigating the comic is easy and intuitive. Tap or swipe to read the next page or to go back. Touching the middle of the screen gives you more control and lets you dive deeper into the rich history surrounding the story. At the bottom of the screen, we can flip through pages. It's also easy to jump to different chapters. A handy guide can be called up to provide a synopsis of the cast of characters. Occasionally, you'll see a star while reading. Touch it to pull up additional information about key story points. Historical documents that have only recently been declassified, and even newsreels from the era. Operation Ajax by Cognito Comics. Experience it at the App Store.
Ta-da! Cool. Anyway, so that gives you an idea of what it looks like to mix all these different formats and functions together. And it gets really interesting as you start to figure out how these things overlap in meaningful ways. So Ajax is actually built on Unity. How many people here know what Unity actually is?